Have you ever poured your entire life into a place, only to be told you do not belong there? That is exactly the story of a British man who spent the majority of his life growing up in Singapore. He went to school there. He made friends there. He completed his national service, 2 full years of military duty, defending a country he genuinely loved. He built his identity around Singapore's streets, its food, its culture, and its people. And yet, despite doing everything right, despite checking every single box, Singapore's immigration authority rejected his citizenship application, not once, but twice. So what did he do next? He stopped chasing a door that would not open. He looked back toward Britain, the country on his passport, the country he barely knew, and made a life-changing decision. This is the story of why a British man who grew up in Singapore ultimately walked away from ever becoming a Singaporean citizen. It is a story about identity, belonging, fairness, and what a country truly owes the people who give it everything they have. Point 1. He was born British but raised Singaporean. The first thing you need to understand is that this man held a British passport from birth. His parents were British nationals. But almost immediately after he was born, his family relocated to Singapore. So while he carried a United Kingdom passport, Singapore was the only real home he ever knew. He grew up eating chicken rice and laksa. He studied in Singapore schools. He spoke with a Singaporean accent. His closest friends were Singaporean. His entire childhood, his teenage years, his sense of humor, his habits, and his values, all shaped by Singapore. Britain was a name on a document, not a place in his heart. This matters deeply because Singapore does not grant citizenship simply because you were born on its soil. Unlike many countries, Singapore requires at least one parent to already be a citizen before a child can claim citizenship at birth. So this man, born to British parents, grew up as a permanent resident, a status that gave him the right to live there but never the full title of citizen. He was Singaporean in every way that felt real, except on paper. Point 2. He served national service like every Singaporean man. In Singapore, every male citizen and permanent resident is required to serve national service, which is a mandatory military commitment typically lasting around 2 years. This is not optional. It is a legal duty. And this British-born man did it. He showed up, he trained, he served, and by all accounts his performance transcript was described as very good. National service in Singapore is physically demanding and mentally tough. Young men are assigned to the Army, Navy, or Air Force and undergo everything from basic military training to specialized roles. For a foreigner, someone who holds a British passport and could technically have lived abroad to avoid this obligation, choosing to stay and serve is an enormous statement of commitment. Most Singaporeans and even online communities assumed that a man who completed national service would have almost a guaranteed path to citizenship. It seemed like the ultimate proof of loyalty. You gave 2 years of your life to protect a country. Surely that country would welcome you as one of its own. That assumption, as it turned out, was completely wrong. Point 3. His citizenship was rejected twice. After completing his national service, this man applied for Singapore citizenship. He was rejected. He tried again. He was rejected a second time. The Immigration and Checkpoints Authority, known as the ICA, does not explain why it rejects applications. There is no detailed feedback, no list of what went wrong, and no clear roadmap for what to fix. The rejection letter arrives, and that is essentially all you get. This left the man confused, frustrated, and heartbroken. He shared his story on a popular online forum and the reaction from the Singaporean community was overwhelmingly sympathetic. One person wrote that they always believed serving national service guaranteed a 100% chance of approval. Another community member called the system broken, pointing out that people who grew up in Singapore and served in the military were being rejected while economically valuable immigrants with no emotional roots in the country were being approved. For this man, 2 rejections after 2 years of military service felt like a betrayal of everything he had given. Point 4. Singapore does not allow dual citizenship. Here is where things get even more complicated and where many people outside Singapore are genuinely surprised. Singapore does not allow dual citizenship. Period. If you want to become a Singaporean citizen, you must fully renounce your previous nationality. For this British man, that meant giving up his British passport, the only citizenship he was born with, permanently. There is no keeping one foot in both worlds. Once you become a Singaporean citizen, your British passport must be surrendered and your British citizenship formally renounced. This is a massive ask. The British passport is one of the most powerful travel documents in the world, offering visa-free or visa-on-arrival access to nearly 190 countries. It provides the right to live and work freely across the United Kingdom. For someone already uncertain about whether Singapore truly wanted him, the idea of permanently giving up that powerful British identity in exchange for a citizenship that had already been denied twice must have felt terrifying. The no dual citizenship rule made the stakes extraordinarily high. Point 5. The ICA's opaque and secretive process. One of the most frustrating aspects of Singapore's citizenship system is how completely non-transparent it is. The ICA evaluates each application based on a wide range of factors. These include whether you can contribute significantly to Singapore's economy, whether you intend to stay permanently, your employment history, your financial stability, your social integration, your conduct record, and even personal achievements like sporting or artistic excellence. But none of this is explained to the applicant when a rejection arrives. You do not know which factor hurt you. You do not know what was missing. You do not know if you were close or nowhere near approval. For a man who had lived his entire life in Singapore, served in its military, studied in its universities, and maintained a clean legal record, the silence was deafening. Immigration lawyers and advisors in Singapore openly acknowledge this opacity, noting that even highly qualified applicants with long records of contribution can be turned away without any explanation. The system is designed to give the government total discretion, and that discretion can feel deeply arbitrary to those on the receiving end. Point 6. The online community reaction exposed a deeper problem. When this man posted his story online, the response from Singaporeans was raw and emotional. People were angry, not just for him, but for a broader pattern they recognized. Community members shared that they knew others in similar situations. People who grew up in Singapore, served national service, built careers, paid taxes, and were still denied citizenship while watching newer, wealthier arrivals receive it with apparent ease. One widely quoted comment summed up the frustration perfectly, asking how a system could reject someone who grew up there and served in the army while approving economically profitable immigrants who had no emotional connection to the country. This reaction points to a genuine tension at the heart of Singapore's immigration policy. The country is highly pragmatic. It values economic contribution above almost everything else. A foreign billionaire investor may be welcomed with open arms while a young man who spent his teenage years in Singapore schools and carried a rifle in its army waits in line indefinitely. For many Singaporeans, that feels fundamentally unfair and emotionally wrong. Point 7. The decision to stop trying and keep his British citizenship. After 2 rejections and years of uncertainty, the British man made a decision. He chose to stop pursuing Singapore citizenship and instead embrace his British identity. This was not an easy choice. It was not driven by anger alone. It was a rational, practical decision rooted in reality. His British passport offered him enormous global freedom. The United Kingdom offered him the right to live, work, and build a life without needing anyone's approval. He had already given Singapore 2 years of military service and multiple years of waiting. He had demonstrated his commitment more than most people ever do. But Singapore's system had not recognized that commitment in the way he had hoped. Holding on to British citizenship meant he retained one of the world's strongest passports. It meant options. Options for working in Europe, traveling without visas, accessing United Kingdom public services, and eventually potentially building a life back in Britain or elsewhere. For someone who had been made to feel unwanted by a bureaucratic system, taking back that British identity was also a form of reclaiming dignity. Point 8. Singapore's single citizenship rule has deep historical roots. To understand why Singapore operates this way, you need to understand its history. Singapore established its single citizenship rule back in 1957, long before the country gained full independence. The founding principle was that a citizen must give their whole loyalty to Singapore and Singapore alone. The country's leaders believed that dual citizenship would weaken national identity and divide loyalties. This belief has not changed in nearly 70 years. The People's Action Party government has consistently defended the single citizenship principle, calling it essential to national identity. There have been debates, especially as more Singaporeans emigrate abroad and as foreign talent is actively recruited, about whether this rigid stance still makes sense. Some argue it forces talented people to make impossible choices. Others argue it pushes away the very people who love Singapore most. But the government has held firm. No dual citizenship for anyone. The result is a system where people like this British man must gamble everything on a process that gives them no feedback and no guarantees, and where walking away sometimes becomes the only rational choice left. Point 9. What being rejected twice really costs a person. Let us pause on something that often gets lost in the policy discussion. 2 rejections are not just bureaucratic outcomes. They are deeply personal emotional experiences. This man spent his formative years in Singapore. He made memories there. He built friendships there. He sweated through military training there. He studied engineering at one of Singapore's top universities, Nanyang Technological University. One of the best institutions in Asia. And after all of that, an authority stamped a rejection on his identity twice. Imagine investing your entire youth into a place and being told twice that you are still not quite enough. That kind of repeated rejection does not just sting. It reshapes how you see yourself and how you see the country you thought was yours. The man said publicly that he felt lost after the second rejection. He did not know what to do. He turned to strangers on the internet for advice because the official system gave him nothing. That level of confusion and pain is real. And it is the human cost of an immigration policy that prioritizes discretion over transparency and economics over emotional belonging. Point 10. His story reflects a global identity crisis facing many expat children. This man's story is not unique. Across the world, there are thousands of children raised in countries their parents moved to, who grow up feeling completely local but legally remain foreigners. They are sometimes called third culture kids, people who absorbed the culture of a country that was never technically theirs by nationality. Singapore has tens of thousands of such individuals. Children of expats who went to local schools, spoke local languages, formed local friendships, and feel genuinely Singaporean. But under Singapore's strict rules, feeling Singaporean is not the same as being Singaporean. The citizenship system is not designed for emotional belonging. It is designed around legal status, economic value, and long-term contribution projections. The result is an entire generation of people caught between two worlds, holding foreign passports for countries they barely know while being quietly turned away from the only place that truly feels like home. This British man's decision to finally embrace his British citizenship was not a rejection of Singapore. It was an acceptance of reality. He chose to stop waiting for a door that kept closing in his face. So there you have it. A British man who gave Singapore his childhood, his teenage years, his military service, and his love, only to be turned away twice by a system that never told him why. He did not leave out of anger. He left because sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is stop begging for validation from a place that refuses to give it. Singapore is an extraordinary country in so many ways. Safe, clean, efficient, and one of the most remarkable success stories in modern history. But its citizenship system, with its total lack of transparency and its no dual citizenship rule, creates genuine heartbreak for people who fall between the cracks. People who are not foreign enough to be clearly outsiders, and not officially recognized enough to be insiders. If this story resonates with you, if you have ever felt like you belonged somewhere that refused to claim you back, then you already understand exactly how this man felt standing at that crossroads. Sometimes home is not where they give you a passport. Sometimes home is where you finally decide to stop asking permission to belong. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it.